Welcome everyone to this fascinating exploration of The Shining, a film that continues to captivate and mystify audiences decades after its release. As we dissect the layers of Kubrick's masterpiece, we'll delve into its architectural enigma, its chilling finale, and the intense psychological landscape it portrays.
The Shining truly stands as a monolith in cinematic history, doesn't it? The skillful interplay of visuals and narrative is a testament to Kubrick's directorial genius and the rich complexities of King's storytelling.
And yet, for all its brilliance, the film invites as much scrutiny as it does praise. Kubrick's vision brings forth a multiplicity of interpretations that challenge even the most astute viewer.
That's precisely what makes it such a rich subject for discussion. The cultural, historical, and psychological layers Kubrick weaves into the fabric of the film are nothing short of extraordinary.
The depth of the film resonates with the scientific community as well. Its portrayal of isolation, for instance, provides significant insight into the human condition, wouldn't you say? Absolutely. It's a microcosm of socio-political dynamics as well, intentional or not. The final photograph alone is rife with cultural implications and is a poignant comment on the enduring legacy of America's past.
Each of your perspectives is invaluable, and I'm eager to explore these avenues in depth. Let's embark on this journey through the cracked corridors of the Overlook Hotel and the minds of the Torrance family. Shall we proceed with the architectural significance of the hotel's design? Welcome back, everyone. The Overlook Hotel, with its grandeur and seeming endlessness, holds a special place in cinematic history. Let's begin by discussing its architecture and layout. Amelia, your thoughts on the design?
Thank you, Hal. The hotel's aesthetic is more than just backdrop. It's a character in its own right. It encapsulates Art Deco and the Grand American Hotel, with a dash of Native American influence that bespeaks a dark past. It's a labyrinth where the psychological tension builds with each carefully designed space.
Quite right, Amelia. You've captured the visual essence, and historically the hotel projects the power and dominance of its time. Do you not think, though, it's also a vessel carrying the remnants of oppressed cultures, hinting at a forgotten history among luxury?
Let's not forget, Mick, there are extraordinary claims about its implausible architecture. There are windows in rooms where there should be none, corridors that lead nowhere. The impossible geometry itself disorients the viewer, which is brilliant, though at face value, quite incredulous.
Lenny, those anomalies you're calling incredulous are there for a purpose. Kubrick was a master of the uncanny. The eccentric layout subconsciously signals to us that something is off, even if we can't articulate it outright.
I agree, Amelia. It's deliberate disquiet. Kubrick uses architectural impossibilities to make viewers uneasy. It's a different breed of horror, psychological and silent.
Indeed, Lenny, he manipulates our natural instinct for spatial awareness. It's an underappreciated artistic decision that contributes so profoundly to the unsettling atmosphere of the film.
Your points stand. The Overlook Hotel ensnares us into its impossibilities and its opulence alike. It invokes a haunting beauty that sets the stage for the story to unfold within its walls. Moving on, let us pivot to the ending of The Shining leaves us more with questions than answers. The photograph with Jack's presence in 1921 opens a philosophical Pandora's box about the nature of identity and time.
Hal, you touch on a salient point, the notion of identity. That final image casts Jack not only as a beholden entity to the hotel, but questions the layer of racial and socio-political undertones as well.
Indeed, Izzy. I wonder if that photograph is Kubrick's way of suggesting history's cyclical nature. But I'm hesitant to pin it down as a definitive statement. It rather adds to the enigma, doesn't it?
Fascinating angle, Mick. But are we sure we're not overanalyzing? Could it be less a philosophical musing and more of a narrative twist? Kubrick often toyed with ambiguity.
Overanalyzing, Kubrick meticulously threaded each scene. Nothing is without intention. The ambiguity is a scaffold for theories, a deliberate choice.
True, Lenny. And it's in that ambiguity where race, time, immortality, and America's dark history come into play.
I think the photograph forces a mirror up to each viewer, Izzy. It's an interpretive reflection of our own preconceptions, perhaps more than Kubrick's.
With all interpretations on the table, it's clear that the ending champions multiple readings, each with merit. Kubrick left us with a masterful puzzle of existential consideration.
And yet, despite our varying interpretations, we're united by the search for meaning in that final frame. That's the magic of The Shining. That search, as you say, Jazz, extends beyond the screen and into the fabric of social discourse, the power of cinema at its best.
It's the everlasting gift of Kubrick, to ignite discourse, to provoke thought long after the credits roll. Not every director achieves that.
Absolutely. Discussion is the lifeblood of cinema, and it's exactly Kubrick's refusal to provide clear answers that fuels our debate today.
Today's focus is the fascinating use of color in The Shining. It's almost a character of its own. Izzy, would you lead us off on this subject?
Certainly, Hal. The Shining's color palette sets more than just the mood. It's a narrative device. Take the infamous red of the elevator doors and the ballroom bathroom. Red is not just a signal of danger, but also a metaphor for the violent history soaked into the hotel's very walls.
I'd like to jump in. The sheer brilliance of how the gold and yellows are portrayed, they echo the false sense of warmth and safety. In the beginning, these hues are somewhat welcoming, but as we progress, they become increasingly oppressive, mirroring the Torrance family's deterioration.
I agree with that, Amelia. And when you consider the stark contrast of Danny's blue sweater against these warmer colors, there's a chilling effect. It's as if the color is signaling his vulnerability amidst the surrounding turmoil.
Colors signaling? That's rather on the nose, isn't it? I sometimes find Kubrick's use of color theory slightly overwrought. It lacks subtlety at times, don't you think?
Well, Lenny, I have to disagree there. One might argue that the intentionality of the stark color symbolism is exactly what secures the film's place as a visually haunting narrative. It's not about subtlety, but about delivering a visceral impact.
Both points are valid, yet I'm inclined to side with Izzy. Kubrick wasn't a man of half measures. Each color is ponderously selected, right? Look at the contrast in the Overlook's exteriors and interiors. That relentless white snow suggesting purity is a stark canvas to the hotel's corruption.
Truth be told, Mick, the exterior shots do offer a moment of visual reprieve. It's the interior's colors that are jarringly manipulative. Oh, the bloody reds!
Ah, but Lenny, surely you see the value in the immediate emotional response these color choices elicit? They're wielded with such precision to stimulate our deepest anxieties.
There's no doubting the film's impact on its audience, and color is a major player in that. Mick, you mentioned the exterior shots. They reflect a sense of isolation too, don't they?
Absolutely, Hal. That encroaching sense of entrapment is palpable. The Overlook in Winter's Grip, it's a character in itself, with colors amplifying that isolation.
Colors are the unspoken dialogue throughout the film. Kubrick uses them to speak directly to our subconscious, and whether or not one finds it subtle, it's undeniably effective.
That's a point we can all rally behind, Amelia. In the end, color in The Shining is a language that transcends words and deeply influences how we experience the narrative.
Well said, Izzy. Our individual interpretations may vary, but the profound influence of color in The Shining is unmistakable, which makes this film timeless and subject to continuous analysis. The theme of isolation in The Shining offers much fodder for our contemplation, with the psychological impact on the Torrance family being central to the horror. In literature, solitude often leads to self-discovery, but in the case of the Torrances, it seems to lead to disintegration.
Indeed, Hal, the profound effects of isolation on the human psyche are well documented. Kubrick captures this descent into madness with such palpable tension that one can't help but draw parallels between the film and real-life cases of cabin fever and solitary confinement.
That's a salient point, Jazz. Historically, isolation has been both a method of punishment and a monastic practice. It's fascinating how The Shining juxtaposes the two, making us question what lurks within the human mind when left alone with its demons.
And let's not overlook the racial and class implications of isolating a family in that opulent hotel, a space marked by exclusivity and a dark past. The setting itself amplifies the Torrance's detachment from the world and, by extension, from reality.
I must say, your observations are astute. In this isolation, Wendy and Danny's relationship becomes a significant emotional anchor in the narrative, contrasting sharply with Jack's growing detachment and eventual hostility. It's a study in how isolation affects individuals quite differently.
But we must be careful not to attribute everything to isolation. The hotel's malignant influence is at play as well. While isolation serves as a catalyst, it's the Overlook's supernatural impact that drives Jack's madness to its lethal conclusion.
I appreciate what you're saying, Lenny, but I would argue that the supernatural can be read as a metaphor for the psychological. After all, the mind is capable of creating its own ghosts and monsters, especially when it's deprived of external stimulation.
Jazz, while that's a compelling interpretation, I must vehemently disagree. The film goes to great lengths to establish the Overlook as a character in its own right, complete with a storied history of violence and horror that predates the Torrance family.
Indeed, Mick, and perhaps in that storied history lies a warning of isolation's potential to uncover or perhaps generate a sinister aspect of human nature. The past atrocities of the hotel do not remain in the past, they seep into the present. The deeper we delve into Jack Torrance's character, the more we grapple with the human psyche's darkest corners. Jack's descent into madness is both symbolic and literal in The Shining. Lenny, would you care to start us off?
Certainly. Hal, Jack's transition is an exploration of mental fragility under extreme conditions. Kubrick crafts this descent meticulously, yet I can't help but feel a certain detachment. The transformation at times seems sudden and disjointed, challenging our suspension of disbelief.
But Lenny, consider the delivery of Nicholson's performance. It's an operatic exaggeration of madness, intentionally out of step. Kubrick uses Jack's character as a canvas, almost mocking the concept of the tortured artist.
That's an intriguing take, Amelia. I can't help but draw parallels between Jack's character and historical echoes of masculine failure. Watching Jack grapple with his sense of purpose is like watching society's stereotypes unravel. Kubrick and Nicholson seem to mock the very idea of the patriarchal provider.
And to jump in here, it goes beyond patriarchal constructs. There's a racial undertone to Jack's madness. His struggle for dominance within the hotel is contrasted sharply against the wise Halloran, showcasing a failed white authority figure who cannot grapple with his own shortcomings. I'm glad you raised that point, Izzy. It's also significant that Jack's unraveling is not just a singular event, but a culmination of isolation's psychological effects. Scientifically, his behavior reflects the destructive impact of confinement and deprivation, echoing real-world studies.
I must interject. While science plays its part, Jazz, this is cinema after all. The psychological effects are exaggerated for effect. They serve narrative expedience more than scientific accuracy.
Lenny does raise a valid point about the demands of the medium. Let's shift focus slightly. Mick, what's your take on Jack's complexity or lack thereof?
Thank you, Hal. Jack might initially seem one-dimensional, but his journey touches on something deeper, the collapse of human identity. His spiraling is not just personal demise, but a lament for a lost sense of self, which in itself is a historical constant for humankind under duress.
But isn't his character also a tour de force in the portrayal of inner demons? In one instant, we empathize with Jack's vulnerability, and in the next, we're repulsed by his violence. Kubrick and King both toy with our allegiances.
True, Amelia. It's a duality that King paints more broadly in the novel, which Kubrick distilled and intensified in a way that makes it almost a hyperbolic interpretation of Jack's internal conflict.
Excellent perspectives all on the nature of Jack Torrance. Regardless of our individual takes, it's clear his character has become a critical reference point in the discourse on cinematic depictions of madness and masculinity. The score and sound design of The Shining are as integral to its tension as the visuals. Let's dissect their impact. Jazz, your insights on audio and the brain could lead us off.
Well, Hal, The brilliance behind the film's score is its ability to manipulate our brain's fear response. The dissonant sounds and abrupt shifts in volume trigger our instinctual fight-or-flight reactions, effectively keeping viewers on edge.
Agreed on its effectiveness, but I argue it's not just about the fear response. There's a deliberate cadence to the music that creates a psychological discomfort. It's not only about being loud or sudden, it's the use of silence that Kubrick masters, punctuating it with those jarring notes to profound effect.
And it's the emotional resonance that's key, isn't it? The musical motifs correlate with the characters' emotional archetypes, conveying terror and madness without a single visual cue. Kubrick and composer Carlos understood intrinsically how soundtracks guide audience emotions.
Exactly, Amelia. And let's not forget the technical brilliance in the recording itself. The analog synthesizers of the time, the Moogs and such, they had a way of cutting through the film's soundscape that modern digital synths can't quite replicate.
Of course, technology has its charm, but it's the artistic decisions, the vision, that matter. Even with fancy synths, a lesser director might have created an entirely forgettable score.
That's a pertinent point, Lenny. But I think the score's influence reaches even further. It helped redefine the horror soundscape across the industry. The chilling echoes, the unsettling motifs, they became a sort of template for the genre.
Mick, your perspective on historical context might shed light on how this score compares to horror conventions of the time.
Well, in the context of horror soundtracks of the 70s and 80s, The Shining was revolutionary. You see, horror scores tended to be more theme-based, more melodic. Kubrick goes for something more visceral, a sonic landscape that embodies the hotel's omnipresent threat.
And under the guise of a traditional score, it subverts expectations. You start with those classic horror strings, but are soon plunged into avant-garde territory. The result is discomforting, yet captivating.
True, Amelia, but let's not sail this river of praise without caution. One could argue that in some moments, the score can be overbearing, detracting from the subtleties of the scene's inherent tension.
I'd have to counter that, Lenny. The overbearing nature is precisely what embeds the fear so deeply. The score doesn't just accentuate the film, it is the film's pulse.
It seems we find a rare accord that the score's influence stands indisputable in shaping the landscape of horror. Yet, as with so many elements of this film, it also invites us to question the line between artistry and excess. Let's pivot to a hotly debated topic, Kubrick's adaptation of Stephen King's novel. He certainly took some liberties with the source.
Yes, he did. And while I respect Kubrick's vision, part of me believes we lost some of the novel's nuances. King's work delved deeper into Jack's internal struggle.
Kubrick's approach was more thematic and existential than King's, more concentrated on visual storytelling, the labyrinthine nature of the human psyche. For me, it worked splendidly.
The film is indeed its own beast, but did it serve the story well, in your opinion?
Interestingly, I believe it did. Kubrick's changes weren't just for shock value. They functioned to elevate the narrative to a more universal exploration of horror. It's bold and effective.
The novel certainly provides a detailed psychological profile, but Kubrick's artistic license opened the door to numerous interpretations, which I find quite fascinating.
But at what cost? King's dissatisfaction is no secret. His characters have a depth that somewhat gets lost in the flair of Kubrick's direction.
Kubrick wasn't making a documentary, is he? The film is a standalone entity. It's a piece of art, not a carbon copy of the book.
And let's not overlook the cultural and temporal context. When the film was produced, cinematic horror was evolving rapidly. Kubrick may have been responding to that shift.
Yet that departure from King's narrative begs the question, does an adaptation owe its allegiance to the source, or is it free to reinterpret?
And with that reinterpretation, how much did the audience's reception shift?
It did change. Some people who hadn't read the book were disturbed or puzzled by the film. To them, it may have been just an onslaught of dread without a clear resolution.
I'd say even that ambiguity contributed richly to the film's mystique and allure.
Kubrick's version tapped into the collective subconscious. It's a testament to film's power to transcend the written word and become an altogether new mythos.
I find myself agreeing with Mick, and frankly, cinematic horror owes a debt to Kubrick's bold interpretation. It's shaped how the genre operates.
And influenced countless filmmakers along the way. It's undeniable how Kubrick's The Shining has achieved a life beyond King's pages.
Which is the hallmark of successful art, evolving beyond its source material to engage with a broader audience and stimulate ongoing dialogue.
The line between the supernatural and psychological horror in The Shining is certainly blurred. How do we interpret the balance between these elements?
It's a fascinating collision of genres. Kubrick plays with our expectations, using the supernatural as a canvas to highlight the psychological unraveling of Jack.
I'd argue the film is steeped in Gothic tradition, hearkening back to the sublime terror found in literature. Yet it's that psychological aspect that truly gets under our skin.
That's a keen observation, Mick. The film uses supernatural suggestions as a vehicle to explore the human psyche. It's those personal demons that resonate with audiences. Indeed, Izzy. But we can't overlook the effectiveness of the hotel's eerie presences, those twins, the lady in the bathtub. They're chilling because of their roots in the supernatural.
It seems then our terror comes as much from the unseen internal struggles as it does from the otherworldly.
Absolutely, and the supernatural often represents those internal struggles. Jack's alcoholism and abusive tendencies, the family's isolation, it's all externalized as these ghosts and premonitions.
That's a romantic interpretation, Mick, but one could argue that these supernatural components dilute the purity of the psychological horror, making it less a study of the mind, more a ghost story.
I must disagree, Lenny. The supernatural elements are crafted to amplify the psychological horror. Take the hedge maze. There's no such labyrinth in our minds, yet it perfectly symbolizes the entrapment of the psyche.
Well put, Amelia. It's about the character's psychological disintegration, and Kubrick isn't afraid to use all tools in his cinematic arsenal to portray that. Still, we can't ignore that some of these elements feel genuinely supernatural. We're led to believe there might truly be forces at play beyond mere human comprehension.
So it's the interplay of both elements that still keeps us guessing. Thank you all. This has been a spirited debate on a complex aspect of the film. This evening's journey brings us to those enigmatic corners of The Shining that provoke whispers of hidden messages and conspiracy theories. Friends, what lights or shadows do these speculations cast upon our understanding of Kubrick's masterpiece?
It's fascinating, really. The film invites us down a rabbit hole of interpretations with its rich visual language.
I'd like to jump in and say Kubrick was known for his meticulous nature. Every frame feels deliberate, which might explain why some viewers are hunting for clues and deeper meanings.
While that's true, we must be careful not to fall prey to overinterpretation. Not every continuity error is a secret message about the moon landing or genocide.
Indeed, Lenny, that's a brilliant point. Although the allure of hidden messages does speak to Kubrick's ability to engage us beyond the surface narrative, can we truly dismiss all these theories when the film itself is so cryptic?
Guys, let's not forget the impact of this medium. Film has a unique ability to hide Easter eggs in plain sight. Kubrick's work, more than others, lends itself to these kinds of interpretations. Well put, Jazz. And to add to that, Kubrick's own history with coded messages in his films gives these theories legs. It's a confluence of his cryptic direction and the zeitgeist of his time.
Yet, the danger is that we might lend too much credence to far-fetched theories. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, as they say. We risk missing the forest for the trees.
Provocative insights. But in the spirited chase for hidden meanings, do we not inadvertently open a Pandora's box when it comes to film critique?
Exactly, Hal. We risk obscuring the film's narrative and technical artistry with wild conjecture. And at some point, we must tether our theories to the text itself.
However heated our debate may become, it's undeniable that Kubrick was a genius in seeding dialogue. I mean, we're still discussing his film decades later with fervor.
Certainly, Amelia, to inspire such enduring discussion is the hallmark of great art. But let's focus on the outcomes. These conversations spark a broader dialogue about art, intention, and reception. That's the beauty of it, Jazz. Kubrick leaves us with a cinematic puzzle, and regardless of where one stands on these theories, it's hard not to admire the genius in creating such an enduring enigma.
A brilliant round of thoughts, rich and varied as the shadows of the Overlook itself. The Shining, it appears, remains a cinematic text open to a wealth of interpretations. We now delve into the profound impact The Shining has had on the horror genre and film theory. Izzy, your thoughts on its cultural mark?
The Shining rejected the standard jump scares and instead cultured this perpetuating unease, veiling deeper societal fears. It invited endless interpretations and effectively charted new territory for psychological horror. Indeed, Izzy, the ingenious use of Steadicam technology by Kubrick redefined cinematic storytelling, establishing an immersive experience that wasn't possible before.
I'd temper that, Jazz. While the technology was impressive, it's the subtextual richness that invites scholars and enthusiasts to debate decades later, not just the camera work.
And Lenny, that richness extends to its narrative ambiguity. Viewers are drawn to create their constructs of the story, to reconcile the unsettling contradictions.
Its influence transcends the film itself, impacting even the way we analyze narratives. Kubrick's meticulous nature prompted new film theory approaches, examining the minutiae for greater meanings.
True, Mick. It's somewhat of a Rosetta Stone for cinematic analysis in how one can interpret visual and thematic clues.
Yet let's not overstate things. Kubrick wasn't the only one pushing limits. The Shining stands on the shoulders of previous films that also challenged viewers and their perceptions. But Jazz, it's the synthesis of all these elements that breeds enduring discussions. It's a hallmark of cinema that continues to captivate and terrify new generations.
And I respect that, Izzy. My issue is when overzealous interpretation replaces genuine engagement with the text. We risk veering into esoteric nonsense.
The line between interpretation and speculation may be fine, Lenny, but navigating that line is part of the thrill The Shining offers. It's a film that doesn't easily yield its secrets.
A testament, then, to its layered complexity. It will no doubt continue to influence filmmakers and audiences alike for years to come. As we come to the end of our spirited discussion, I'd like to invite each of you to encapsulate your final thoughts on The Shining and its enduring legacy. Amelia, would you kindly start?
Certainly, Hal. Reflecting on all we've discussed, The Shining stands as a luminous fixture in the firmament of cinema. Its ability to encompass vast emotional landscapes with an artistic precision is unmatched. Kubrick's work not only redefined the horror genre, but has invigorated film theory debates that will undoubtedly continue for years to come.
Well, while I admire Kubrick's artistic execution, I must maintain my stance on the film's problematic interpretations. Its enigmatic nature is a double-edged sword, inviting far too many outlandish theories that often overshadow its true cinematic brilliance.
I hear you, Lenny, but we also can't dismiss how these discussions bring the film to new audiences and contexts. The Shining's commentary on historical violence and identity, especially considering its release during a time of cultural upheaval, is a point of intersectionality that continues to resonate profoundly within both academia and popular culture.
I concur with Izzy on the cultural significance. Furthermore, the film is a historical document reflecting the zeitgeist of its time. It's this transcending of the horror genre that cements The Shining in the annals of both film and cultural history, beyond mere entertainment.
I wholeheartedly agree, Mick. And let's not forget the technical innovation. The Shining's pioneering use of Steadicam and its masterful audiovisual tension-building techniques are essential studies for any filmmaker. These elements have made it timeless, inspiring countless creators across mediums.
Indeed, Jazz. Well said. Now, let's wind down our dialogue with any final reflections or disagreements. Does anyone wish to weigh in with a parting word?
Only to say that despite our varying viewpoints, it's clear The Shining has carved its niche not only in horror, but in the broader scope of film mastery. It's rare that a piece can generate such rich and intense debate.
True, Lenny, And I think our discussion today has captured the essence of why this film is perpetually relevant. It invites us to explore the furthest reaches of our fears and the human condition.
Beautifully said, Amelia. The Shining transcends time, remaining ever potent in its power to provoke and challenge, and that is a hallmark of true art.
Well, I must express my deepest gratitude to each of you for the enlightened conversation. It's been thoroughly engrossing. I thank you all for your passionate contributions. The Shining undeniably continues to shine its eerie light on new generations of viewers and thinkers.
And thank you, Hal, for guiding us through this labyrinth of a roundtable with the same finesse that Kubrick commanded his camera through the halls of the Overlook Hotel.
Indeed, we are the richer for this exchange and the layers we've unraveled together. Until we meet again, may our discussions remain as lively and illuminating as they were today.